They said I wasn't on the list. Not in a whisper. Not behind closed doors. In front of everyone. In the long, echoing hallway outside the courtroom, where flags hung limp like forgotten promises, and the chatter of junior officers buzzed like flies around the dead. My name wasn't called. Again. The roll ran smooth through the alphabet, skipping over mine as if someone had pressed delete not by accident, but with full intention. Do you know what it feels like when your own blood pretends you were never born? My brother stood across from me in his suit. No uniform. Of course he never served. He was the favored son, the one who stayed home, who told bedtime stories to our parents while I reported across oceans, trading comfort for intel, the soft light of home for the green glow of satellite screens in Kabul, in Syria, in that nameless station near the Red Sea. And yet, he stood there like a rightful heir, arms folded, lips curled. She shouldn't even be here, he said, loud enough for the others to hear. It's not her place. I remember staring at him, not blinking, not flinching, not moving because that was how we survived in training. Stillness. Absorb. Don't react. His wife stood beside him, eyes on the courtroom doors. My mother was somewhere inside already. I hadn't seen her in 2 years. She never asked where I'd gone or what I'd done. Not once. This wasn't a criminal court, it was a family hearing, a probate dispute. My father had died. My name was absent from the inheritance. The executor, a man I'd once seen drunk at my father's birthday, had looked me dead in the eye during the pre-trial and said, "Your name doesn't appear on any of the declarations. Your father was clear." Then he shrugged. "You'd been gone too long?" He said you didn't want anything to do with the family. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. I just asked one question. Did he say that before or after I pulled encrypted intelligence off a foreign general's phone that saved American lives? No answer. You ever stand in a room where the medals you earned mean less than the stories someone else told in your absence? I was in full uniform that day. Navy blue, with decorations that didn't glitter, they whispered. Joint Service Commendation, Navy and Marine Corps Achievement. One that wasn't even supposed to be worn publicly. Not yet. My insignia caught the courtroom light like silent defiance. And yet, the lawyer didn't look at it. The family didn't see it. Not really. They saw a traitor. That's what my mother had called me 2 years ago when I sent a classified email during her church Easter brunch, the only day I'd been granted a secure window to transmit encrypted field data. You abandoned us. She'd screamed on the phone later. What kind of daughter misses her father's heart attack because of some shadow war? The kind of daughter who had blood on her boots and a code name instead of a birthday in the mission logs. But I never told her that. I never told her anything. I was trained not to. The courtroom smelled like fresh polish and dust. My boots echoed on the tile, the sound sharp. They didn't want me there. That much was clear. But I wasn't there for them. I sat in the back row, silent. I didn't speak once, my hands folded, my face still. The estate lawyer made his statements. Property, trust, savings, titles all divided among the remaining acknowledged family members. A phrase like a bullet. My name, unspoken. Again. My service unmentioned. Then came the box. My father had left a private sealed item to be opened in the courtroom. It was his request. The executor hesitated, cleared his throat, opened it with a practiced hand. Inside was a velvet pouch. He reached in, pulled out a medal. I recognized it before anyone else did, but no one else in the room gasped, because no one else knew what it was. The Defense Distinguished Service Medal. It shouldn't have been there. It isn't even given posthumously. Not usually, and definitely not through private channels. My eyes narrowed. Then I saw it tucked beneath the medal. A sealed envelope, plain white, no return, Only one word, he's. Not my brother. Not my father. Me. The executor looked confused. His voice cracked slightly as he read the note aloud, as the court recorder kept typing to my daughter, who served where I could not. I called her a traitor once, but the president disagreed. Silence. Complete. Shattering silence. You know that moment when even your enemies realize they've been sitting on the wrong side of the story? The court official paused, clearly unsure if it was real. I could see it in his eyes. Doubt. Confusion. Then a voice behind me said, low and unmistakable, "She's earned it." Everyone turned. A man in full four-star uniform stepped forward from the side door. I hadn't seen him enter. "General Avery, you don't forget the face of a man you once risked your clearance to protect." He saluted me, in front of my entire family. They didn't move. No one spoke. He stepped closer and placed the box not on the lawyer's podium, not on the table, not on the floor, but in my lap. "You weren't supposed to be on trial today," he said quietly. "You were supposed to be honored." Then he turned to the judge. "This medal was authorized by the department, quietly, under a different name. That name now returns to her." He didn't explain. He didn't need to. I stood up slowly, the box in my hand, the silence thicker than any battlefield fog. My brother was pale. His wife clutched his arm. My mother covered her mouth. I didn't look at any of them. Instead, I faced the bench and asked, "For the record, is the court satisfied?" No one answered. But the gavel came down anyway. Satisfied or not, the truth had already detonated. Outside the courthouse, the air was thick and hot. Not from the sun, it was winter, but from the friction of all that had not been said inside. Asphalt cracked beneath my boots as I walked down the stairs alone, metal box in one hand, silence in the other. They didn't follow me. Not my brother. Not my mother. Not the cousins who once said I made things too serious when I came home in uniform and didn't laugh at their jokes. No one ran after me. They just stood there, like a painting frozen behind a pane of glass, detailed but untouchable. And me? I stepped off the canvas and kept walking. That medal was heavier than it looked. Not in weight, but in meaning. I knew what it cost. Not just me. Others, too. I thought of Callahan, the analyst who stayed past his shift that night and caught the code slip in the offshore data drop. He died 3 months later in an embassy fire that no one calls arson. I thought of Yuri, who never spoke a word aloud, but slipped me the second layer decrypt under the table, knowing it would seal his fate. I thought of the child in Ankara, the one I held for 5 seconds before I handed her to the evacuation crew and went back into the tunnel. The medal said, "Distinguished," but nothing about what was lost. You ever receive an award and wonder if it's just a burial shroud made of gold? I didn't go straight home. I drove aimlessly, through the parts of town that still looked the same: corner gas stations, the old church with the broken bell, the bookstore that was now a vape shop. The city hadn't changed much, but I had. The girl who left here in a clean ROTC suit at 18 was gone. She'd been replaced by something harder, quieter, at a red light. I glanced at my reflection in the side mirror. The uniform caught the fading daylight blues and silvers, a flash of crimson from the ribbon. My hair was pinned back regulation tight. No room for softness. My eyes looked like they hadn't slept in years. Maybe they hadn't. My phone buzzed. Blocked number. I knew what that meant. I let it ring out. Then another. And another. Finally, I answered. "Hayes," I said. Not hello. Not yes. Just my name. The way we do when we're on record. A pause. Then, "This is Langley routing. The general requests your presence. He says it's time. I didn't ask for more. I didn't need to." I made a U-turn and drove north. The compound was barely marked an unremarkable gate flanked by unremarkable guards, but my ID was scanned 3 times. I handed over the medal at the front desk. It vanished behind a security case. One of the guards gave me a slight nod. Respect, not recognition. That's the difference between show and truth. I was escorted through a corridor of blank doors. No labels. No plaques. Just numbers. Door 17 opened with a beep, and inside was a cold room, a single table, and a man who didn't bother standing. General Avery looked tired, but not weak. He nodded at the chair. I sat. I shouldn't have done it that way. He said after a long silence, "Done what the medal? The courtroom?" That was a personal gesture, not protocol. I know the risks. I met his eyes. So why he exhaled? Because you kept a secret for 12 years that broke your life in 2, and still you stayed silent. That silence had teeth. It gnawed at every relationship I tried to have, every reunion I skipped, every night I stared at my ceiling with nothing but the hum of old conversations I never got to finish. I didn't have a choice. I said. It was above clearance, above family, above everything. He slid something across the table, a sealed envelope. Another one. No writing on this one. Just my fingerprint box in the corner. I stared at it. What's this, your debrief? From Athens. My heart dropped. That was the op they buried, the one they said never happened. I picked it up slowly. You're clearing it. No, he said. We're classifying it higher, but we wanted you to know what they wrote, before it disappears forever. That's the curse of our work. The highest honors are often the ones that vanish into smoke. Why now? He leaned back. Because your family thinks you betrayed them, and they'll never understand why you disappeared. But we do. And there's something else. He opened a drawer, pulled out a folder. This is the new initiative, Joint Command Integration, a covert leadership unit, civilian military, global shadows. I need someone to lead. He pushed it across. I already have a team. No, you don't, he said. You have ghosts, you have trauma, you have silence. What I'm offering is command. The folder stayed on the table, unopened. You still trust me, I asked. I never stopped. You ever be given power after years of erasure and hesitate? Not because you're unqualified, but because you're finally being seen. I opened the folder. It was thin, but so was every mission brief that ever changed history. You'll be invisible again, he said. No ceremony, no credit, no exit plan. I nodded slowly. I never needed any of that. I left the room 10 minutes later with the folder under my arm. No medal, no box, just the truth. On my way out, I passed by the front security again. One of the guards was watching the hallway monitors. He glanced up. You're the one from court. Right. I paused. Yeah. He didn't say anything else, just gave me a salute, casual, but sharp. It hit me harder than the general's. I didn't salute back. I just nodded. Outside, the air had turned to frost. Street lamps buzzed on one by one. The courthouse was behind me. So was the house I grew up in. And all the people who never asked what my silence had cost me. My phone buzzed again. This time, a message. Unfamiliar number. He told them. About the medal. About the mission. Mom doesn't know what to say. I stared at the screen and typed back one word. Good. Then I turned the phone off. Not silent mode. Off. Completely. Because for the first time in years, I had nothing left to prove, and nothing left to hide. The motel I checked into that night was the kind with flickering signs and paper-thin walls, the kind you pick when you want no one to remember your face. The kind where silence is sacred and nobody asks what's inside the duffel bag you carry like it weighs your past. Room 206, second floor. No elevator. The stairs creaked under my boots like old bones complaining. Inside. I didn't unpack. I never unpack. I just sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the folder the general had handed me. Still sealed, still humming with unspoken orders. The hum of the air conditioner filled the room. An old war documentary played on the TV. I didn't choose it. It was just on. Tanks rolled through dust. Soldiers shouted foreign commands. And somewhere beneath it, a narrator said, "Some wars are never officially declared, but they leave the deepest scars." I turned it off. Because I already knew. My own war never had a name. Not in the paperwork, not in the press, and certainly not at home. I opened the folder slowly. Inside 4 pages. A name I'd never heard. An operation date that matched a day I was supposedly on leave. And a target photograph so blurred it looked like a ghost. I recognized him anyway. We called him Wraith. He had no country, no flag, just fingerprints across 3 continents and a kill list disguised as legal imports. That night in Athens, I had been assigned as backup. What happened in that penthouse suite wasn't clean. We were told there'd be no civilians. There were. We were told he'd be armed. He wasn't. And we were told to make it look like something else. When it was over, my handler said, "You never saw this. The tapes are gone." The command was verbal only. Then they handed me a commendation in a brown envelope and dropped me in a different country with a new mission. And just like that silence. But now, in this folder, it lived again. I read the last page 3 times. Hayes demonstrated unflinching decision-making under layered misinformation. She neutralized the target with surgical precision despite breakdowns in operational integrity. Recommendation: classify action under Code Black. Future consideration for Ghost Command pending. Ghost Command? That wasn't a promotion, that was a rebirth. You ever bury yourself in your own duty so deeply that resurrection feels like punishment? The motel window was cracked. Outside, a neon sign buzzed the word open, even though everything in town looked closed: gas stations, trust, memory. My father used to say, "Don't come home with questions. Come home with results." He never said that to my brother. Only me. Because I was the one who always had something to prove. But what he never understood, what none of them did, was that the proving never ended. Not in the medals, not in the missions, not even in the silence. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, letting the hum of that folder seep into my bloodstream. I should have slept, but sleep wasn't something you earned in my line of work. It was something you stole, 10 minutes at a time. Between threats. At 3:07 a.m., there was a knock. I was already up, already dressed. I cracked the door, didn't open it, and saw her. My mother. Hair pinned up. Coat too thin. Eyes red. She looked smaller than I remembered. "May I come in?" she asked. Voice tight. I didn't move. Just stared. "I don't know how you found me," I said. She nodded once. "Your brother called." Said. Something happened in court. That the general showed up. My silence was a mirror. She saw herself in it and looked away. She stepped back. "I brought you something," she said, holding up a box, the kind that once held birthday cake or wedding leftovers. I didn't take it. "Is it forgiveness?" I asked. She blinked. "What?" "Because I don't need cake." Her lip trembled, but she didn't cry. "Not yet." "I don't know what you've done," she said, "but I know it cost you." That was the closest I'd ever get to an apology. And maybe, in her own language, it was one. I opened the door. Not for her. For closure. She stepped inside, carefully, like the floor might reject her. She sat on the edge of the motel chair, eyes darting toward the folder on the bed. She didn't ask. I didn't offer. We sat in silence for 7 minutes. She broke first. I told them you were reckless, cold, detached, that you left your family for a job. I said nothing. But maybe you left because we never saw you. That one landed. She looked up, eyes shining now. I watched that general salute you. And for the first time, I wondered what you'd been through. I looked at her. Really looked. And I said, everything you were afraid of. I faced. Everything you thought would destroy me, it did. And then I came back anyway. She nodded slowly. I don't know how to fix this. I stood up, walked to the window. You don't, I said. This isn't a wound you patch. It's one you respect. Then I turned to her. Have you ever stood in a room full of strangers and realized your own family knew you least of all? She covered her mouth again, like in the courtroom. I picked up the folder, handed it to her. She didn't open it. Is it safe? She asked. No, I said. But it's true. She held it like it might burn her. Then finally, softly, I'm sorry I called you a traitor. And just like that, something loosened. Not forgiveness, not healing, but release. She stood, walked to the door, paused. Then, almost in a whisper, you look like him when you stand like that. I didn't ask who she meant. I already knew. After she left, I stared at the door for a long time. Then I sat down and exhaled. Because for the first time in years, I felt seen. Not as a daughter, not as a soldier, but as something they couldn't name because they never earned the right to. At dawn, I stood outside the motel, breath fogging in the cold, watching a delivery truck rumble past the edge of the parking lot. My hands were bare. I hadn't brought gloves. I liked the bite of cold it reminded me I was still here, still choosing. The sky was bruised pink and gray, a battlefield sky, a sky I'd seen from rooftop posts and flight decks and desert clearings, always moments before something irreversible began. The folder was back in my duffel bag, sealed again, not to be buried but to be carried. You ever hold something in your hand and realize it doesn't belong to you anymore, but to the version of you that no longer exists? That morning, I walked away from the motel. I didn't check out. I left the key on the nightstand. That was the thing about transients we never expected a return. I drove east, through farm roads and frost-bitten fields, through silence that was no longer suffocating, only wide. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need voices anymore. Mine had returned. I stopped at a diner 2 hours out. A veteran-run place with faded yellow walls, old Navy plaques, and an American flag hung crooked behind the register. The waitress had a limp and a name tag that said B. She didn't ask where I was headed, just poured coffee and nodded when I asked for it black. I sat near the window, boots crossed under the table, watching my reflection flicker in the glass. 2 old men at the counter talked about the war, not mine. Theirs. They spoke in code, like we all do. Half jokes masking real wounds. Remember Ramsey's shoulder, one said. They called it shrapnel, but we all knew it was a damn misfire. The other laughed. He walked with that twitch like it was a badge. They looked over at me once. I nodded. They nodded back. That's the thing about soldiers. We don't ask for proof. We recognize ghosts. My phone buzzed once, a secure alert. I stepped outside to take it. It wasn't a number. It was coordinates. The mission had begun, but before I left, I did one last thing. I drove to the cemetery. Not the military one, the family one, the kind with lopsided stones and plastic flowers clinging to memory like frost. My father's headstone was at the far end. No flag, just his name, no rank, no mention of daughters. I stood there a long time, hands in my coat pockets, watching the wind move the grass. You taught me to stand straight, I whispered. But you never taught me what to do when the people behind you were the first to pull the trigger. I knelt, not in reverence, in defiance, and I pulled something from my bag, not the medal, but the copy of the citation that came with it. I folded it once, tucked it behind the headstone. He called me a traitor, I said aloud, but the general called me a commander. Then I stood and left it there. Let the earth decide who was right. Do you know what it feels like to salute a man who never saluted you back and still walk away taller? I didn't cry. I'd already done that. Alone. Years ago. Under foreign stars. In rooms that smelled like gun oil and regret. Now, there was only wind. I drove straight to the airfield. No escort. No parade. Just me, my duffel, and a coded access card that hadn't been activated in 6 years, but still opened the gate without a blink. Inside the hangar was a bird I hadn't flown since Montenegro. Black, low, silent. The kind that doesn't exist on official manifests. A man in a jumpsuit handed me a clipboard. Commander Hayes. He said. He didn't ask for ID. Didn't question the rank. It had reached him before I did. I signed without speaking. They briefed me inside the cockpit. Encrypted data. Operation name, Shadowcrest. No map. No time zone. Only mission codes and 4 names, none of which were mine, but all of which would be in my care. I read the last line of the briefing. This unit answers to no family, no politics, no headlines, only truth. I sat back, and I smiled. It wasn't joy. It was recognition. The kind of smile you give when the pieces of your life finally form a blade, before takeoff. I closed my eyes. One last image came to me, my mother, standing in the motel doorway, clutching the folder like it might tell her who I am. Then I remembered the general's words. You weren't supposed to be on trial. You were supposed to be honored. Now, I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission. The rotor spun. The hangar lights dimmed behind me. As we lifted off, I looked down one last time, not at the town, not at the courthouse, but at the space where I had once tried to fit, and no longer needed to. You ever fly toward a mission with nothing behind you but silence and feel free for the first time in that moment? The world shrank. No accusations, no inheritance, no family politics, only the sky, and the names they would never know. But one name, mine, stamped into the new log, under a new call sign, Commander Hayes. And if they ask who I am now, tell them I'm the traitor they erased, the daughter they disowned, the ghost they feared, and the woman the military never forgot. We flew low over the Atlantic, silent beneath the clouds, the kind of flight that doesn't get logged. No civilian radar, no flight number, just wind, steel, and purpose. It wasn't my first mission off the books, but this one was different, because this time, I wasn't following orders. I was writing them, and that changed everything. The 4 operatives assigned to my unit arrived at the drop zone ahead of me, 2 intelligence specialists, 1 cyber, 1 extraction, all ghosts, like me. People who lived in shadows and were told to forget the light. None of them asked about my rank. They knew it before I spoke. They didn't salute, either. In our world, silence was the highest form of respect. The safe house was a converted consulate compound buried in a city where every window looked like it watched. Cracked stone walls, steel doors with no knobs. My kind of place. As soon as I stepped inside, I felt it. That air. The one you breathe when you're finally in a room where everyone has bled for the same flag even if no one's allowed to name it. They briefed me in whispers, handed me flash drives, codes, heat maps, a list of movements traced over 3 continents, target unnamed. Operating under a facade of humanitarian logistics, smuggler, arms runner, whispers of biowarfare, and right at the center of it, a name I never thought I'd hear again. Dr. Isaac Renner. He was one of ours. Once, former Defense Intel R&D, vanished 6 years ago after an ethics inquiry. Rumors were he defected. Others said he went rogue. I had seen his name on a whiteboard in a locked room at Langley once, then never again. Now, suddenly, he was everywhere, and the trail pointed to a summit. 1 week out, neutral territory, closed security. But the chatter was loud. Someone was going to test something that would tip the scale. We weren't there to stop a meeting. We were there to prevent a message. If Renner spoke, if he showed the world what we once built together, it would unravel everything. Not just intelligence channels, but alliances, treaties, faith. And the twist, he was using my old algorithm, the one I buried under layers of quantum encryption. The one they swore no one had access to but 3 people, and 2 of them were now dead. The third was me. You ever find out the weapon you tried to destroy is now your responsibility again? It felt like seeing your own fingerprint on a trigger. So I did what I always do when the orders are too heavy. I went for a walk. Just before midnight, I left the compound with no escort, wandered down the empty streets of a city I couldn't name out loud. Coat wrapped tight. Boots quiet. It was cold not from temperature, but from absence. No sound, no music, just stone, shadow, and silence. And then I heard it. A violin. Somewhere, behind an iron gate. Someone was playing. Slow. Wounded. Not practiced. But pure. I stood there for a long time, just listening, because sometimes even warriors need reminders that softness still exists in the world they're trying to protect. And then I whispered not to anyone, just to the air. They called me a traitor once, but maybe they were just afraid I'd survive them. The wind didn't answer. It never does. Back in the safe house, my team was waiting. The youngest Reyes looked at me like I'd just walked through fire. "Commander," she said, "is it true?" About the algorithm, I met her gaze. It was never meant for offense. It was predictive, behavioral, to stop things before they happened. But Renner, he retooled it. For what? For silence. I said, he's going to make entire nations go dark. Not bombs. Not blood. Just disconnection. She nodded, like erasing someone from a family tree. That landed harder than I expected. I nodded. Exactly like that. The plan formed fast. We had 5 days, 3 cities, 1 chance. We would intercept the courier first, the one carrying Renner's data clone, then trace it back to the proxy network. From there, isolate Renner's current terminal, the only one powerful enough to run my original build. It was risky. Layers of firewalls, human shields, back channels. But we didn't flinch. We never do. You know the look someone gets when they realize the person in the room isn't there to impress but to finish. That's what leadership looks like in the dark. On day 3, we breached the data stream. On day 4, we traced the signals. On day 5, we found him. Renner. Live. Breathing. Sitting in a white-walled tech chamber beneath a false embassy. He looked older. Grayer. But the eyes, those sharp, glinting things, still held the same hunger. He didn't reach for a weapon. He just looked up and said, "They sent you." I stood there, my team behind me. "No one sent me." I said, "I volunteered." He laughed. "They still don't understand it, do they? The algorithm? What it really sees?" I didn't answer. He leaned forward. "You tried to destroy it, but they kept the bones. And now it's alive." He reached toward the console. A single red button blinked. I stepped forward, raised my sidearm, and said, "Flat don't. You won't shoot." He whispered, I looked him in the eye, and I said the only words I knew would break him. You never finished the equation. He froze, because he knew it was true. He built the engine, but I had written the failsafe, and I had just activated it. His monitors dimmed. The algorithm, his version, began to eat itself from within. Reyes had deployed the virus before we breached. He just hadn't realized it yet. You can't, he began. But the lights cut out, and so did he. We extracted him alive. The summit never happened. The algorithm was sealed. Again. And this time, I watched it burn. Every last line, every root node, every phantom threat. Gone. We flew back in silence. My team didn't speak. Because they knew. This wasn't just a mission. It was me reclaiming something deeper than code or honor. It was me reclaiming my name. When we landed, the same general who gave me the medal met me at the tarmac. He didn't speak either, just looked at me, then looked past me at the others, and nodded. Because what we had done couldn't be written, but it would be remembered, even if only in rooms without windows. The debrief was short. They always are when the mission worked. But the truth behind it never will. The conference room was cold. Metal chairs, blank walls, no insignia. The kind of room designed to erase ego, to strip every hero down to an outline. Across from me sat 3 men in civilian suits. 1 woman, older, silent, eyes sharp. None gave names. I didn't ask. I'd met their kind before, not field, not policy. They lived above names. I wore my uniform, fully decorated. No one told me to, but I had earned every thread, every pin, and I wasn't going to show up erased. The oldest man cleared his throat. Commander Hayes, Operation Shadowcrest is now officially concluded. The subject has been neutralized, data destroyed, public implications minimal. He looked up at me, fingers laced together. You and your unit performed without flaw. His tone was flat. Praise without warmth. I nodded once. That was the point. The woman leaned forward. Do you regret it? It was the only question in the whole debrief. I held her gaze. Regret is for people who stayed home. She said nothing, just sat back. And that was the end of it. They handed me a sealed envelope, no markings, and dismissed me. I didn't open it right away. I left the compound, walked out into a world that had no idea what almost happened, that a ghost in a lab coat had come close to rewriting power, not with weapons, but with silence. And I had stopped it, quietly, completely, without applause. You ever walk through a city square and realize no one around you will ever know what you just did for them? I passed a boy on a scooter, a couple arguing over coffee, a woman feeding pigeons on the church steps. The world kept turning. That's how you know the mission was successful. I made it to my car, closed the door. Only then did I open the envelope. Inside, a new ID, new credentials, new clearance, higher than before. A name I didn't recognize. It was mine, but a different version. Hayes had been upgraded. They'd built a new file around me, cleaner, tighter, hidden deeper in the system. I no longer existed in any visible military archive, but I outranked nearly everyone who did. They called it sanctioned invisibility, a promotion disguised as disappearance, and I accepted it without hesitation. I wasn't chasing visibility anymore. I was chasing impact. The phone rang that night. Not a secure line. My mother. I debated letting it ring, but something in me, something stubborn and human, answered. She didn't say hello, just breathed into the line. Then your brother's upset. Of course he was. He says it's not fair. That you always get away with things. I almost laughed. Instead, I said, he's right. I do. A pause. Then, quietly, are you coming home? I stared out the window. Which one? You know what I mean? No. I didn't, because the last time I walked into that house, I was treated like a ghost who had overstayed her welcome. My photograph removed from the wall. My name skipped during grace. "I'm not sure where home is anymore," I said, and she whispered, "Maybe it's wherever they salute you." That stayed with me. After the call, I drove to the base, not for duty, but for closure. There's a hall at Fort Garrison, off the main command center. Glass panels, shadow boxes, a wall of medals and citations too classified for the press, but too important to be forgotten. I'd walked past it 100 times. That night, I walked in, and there, between two names I knew, both of whom died with secrets under their tongues, was mine, Hayes, C. No first name, no dates. Just a black plate with silver etching and the words, "Operation Unknown, Service Irreplaceable." I stood there, alone, and I didn't move, because this was the real ceremony. No crowd, no applause, no cameras, just the quiet admission that what I'd done had mattered, and always would. You ever see your name carved in metal and feel more alive than you ever did at a birthday afterward? I sat outside under the floodlights, boots on the steps, breath fogging in the dark. A young officer passed by, recognized the bars, snapped to attention. "Ma'am." I nodded, at ease. He hesitated. "Are the stories true?" I looked up at him. Which ones? He swallowed. About Shadowcrest, about the algorithm. That it could see things before they happened. I held his gaze, and I said, "It didn't predict the future. It just read people better than they read themselves." He nodded slowly. Then, softly, "They said you were a traitor once." I smiled, faintly. "They said a lot of things." He didn't ask more. He didn't need to. And that's when I knew the story had already outgrown me. I wasn't their villain anymore, or their daughter, or even just their soldier. I had become something else. A myth with a pulse, a scar with a name, a warning, whispered through the chain of command. The woman who returned without a parade, but with proof. Not in medals, but in silence. I stood, straightened my coat, and walked away from the wall, the hall, the lights, back into shadow, where I belonged. The wind caught the edge of my coat as I stepped out into the dark again. Fort Garrison loomed behind me, a fortress of memory and forgetting. Its cold steel gates had swallowed men whole, and it had nearly done the same to me. But I wasn't the same woman it had trained. Not anymore. I didn't head back to the city, or the motel, or any place with beds and names and soft things like comfort. I drove east again to the edge of the coast, where the land gave way to ocean and the horizon didn't blink. There's a bunker there, decommissioned, forgotten by most. Not marked on any GPS, but I knew its locks. I had built its silence. It was where I kept the remnants. The versions of myself I couldn't bring home. Inside a single metal desk. A cot. A locked chest. A wall with maps all blank now. The kind of maps you use when you're done pretending borders matter. I lit the old lamp, sat down, and pulled out the final envelope. The one I hadn't opened. The one the general handed me months ago. Long before the trial. Before the medal. Before Renner's betrayal surfaced like rot in the walls. On its surface was one word, debrief. No date. No stamp. Just my name in block print. I stared at it for a long time. You ever have an envelope burn through your hands, not with heat, but with the weight of a truth you may not survive? I opened it slowly. Inside was a transcript. Typed, cold, clinical. A record of an internal briefing. Between two unnamed officers. It took place days after my father's death. I didn't want to read it, but I owed it to myself. The words hit like dry fire. Subject Hayes is considered unstable by family sources. untrustworthy, emotionally compromised, and yet she carried out 5 successful Tier 1 missions under emotional duress, which raises the question, is instability the price of precision? The brother has submitted sealed testimony claiming she falsified deployments. We verified all of them. She didn't lie. Then why does he insist? Because she came back stronger than he ever did. And some men can't survive a woman they can't protect. I stopped reading. My jaw clenched. So that was it. That was how they tried to erase me, not through fact but through narrative. My own blood had lobbied against my career, whispered doubts into the ears of people who decide security clearances over dinner. And still I rose. Still I led. Still I lived. You ever realize the real betrayal didn't come from the enemy but from someone who sat beside you at your childhood table? I finished the transcript. The last line. Recommend elevation, not termination. Hayes doesn't need oversight. She needs distance. They had seen it. Even then. That I could never belong in their rooms. Not because I was unworthy, but because I saw too clearly what they pretended not to. I burned the paper, watched the edges curl, words turning to ash, meaning to dust. Then I walked outside. The ocean was loud that night, angry, endless. I stood at the cliff's edge, hair pulled back, collar high, eyes steady, and I whispered to the sea, to no one. They tried to call me a danger, a traitor, an embarrassment. But I was the proof they couldn't bury, the ghost who refused to fade. I didn't shout it. I said it like a fact, because it was, and because I had one more thing to do. 2 days later, I walked into the Pentagon, alone, dressed in full uniform, medals, bars, the commendation badge no one else in the lobby dared ask about. I walked past the security desk. They didn't stop me. They knew. I rode the elevator to the 7th floor, the one where offices don't have names. I stepped into a conference room with a glass wall and a long steel table. Inside my brother, he looked older, softer, wearing a tie that didn't quite match, and a discomfort that clung to him like sweat. He stood when I entered. Celia, not Commander, not even Hayes, just Celia. I sat. He didn't. He started pacing, like he always did when he was about to lie. I didn't think they'd show you the transcript. He said. They did. I was angry. You were jealous. He stopped, looked at me. Maybe. I tilted my head. You tried to end my career. I tried to bring you home. That's not the same thing. I didn't know what you were doing. You didn't want to know. He sat then, quiet. Why are you here? I asked. He pulled a small box from his bag, set it on the table. I was asked to give this to you. From Dad. He left it with his personal lawyer. Said it wasn't to be opened unless things ever became public. I stared at it. Simple. Black wood. No lock. I opened it. Inside. A note. His handwriting. Celia. If this reaches you, it means I failed twice. Once as a father, and again as a man who couldn't see what stood right in front of him. You were never a traitor. You were the daughter I didn't know how to honor. I hope someday the world does better than I did. Nothing else. No watch. No photo. No heirloom. Just words. But they were enough. I closed the box. Looked at my brother. I don't need this. I said, but I'll accept it. He nodded, slowly, and I stood to leave. As I reached the door, I paused and said, without turning around, they buried my name in court. But the general gave me a medal in silence. My brother didn't respond. He didn't have to. Some truths don't ask for forgiveness. They ask for distance. And that, finally, I had I walked out of that glass-walled room and never looked back. The hallways of the Pentagon don't echo, they absorb. The footsteps of power, betrayal, and silence have passed through them too many times for sound to matter anymore. Mine joined the rest. A rhythm, a weight. A woman no longer asking to be recognized because she was already known. By those who mattered. By those who feared her. And most of all, by herself. Outside. The wind had shifted. Spring was teasing its way through the cold, loosening the last grip of winter on the capital. The sun hovered low, slicing gold through the marble monuments like a scalpel through memory. I didn't go home. Not to the motel. Not to the house with the porch swing and the photo albums that had skipped every chapter of my life that didn't fit their story. Instead, I drove out past the city, past the suburbs, into the hills, where reception faded and the world softened. There was a cabin there. Mine. Bought in cash under a different name. No power lines. No front gate. Just quiet. I hadn't been there in years, but I remembered how the door stuck when the wood swelled, how the floor creaked when you stepped too far to the right of the fireplace. Inside stillness. Dust curled in the light. Books untouched. A coat still hanging on the hook by the door. I didn't clean. I sat and breathed. You ever enter a space that remembers you but doesn't expect you to perform? I made tea. Not out of habit. Out of ritual. Loose leaf. No sugar. One cracked ceramic mug. And I stared out the window. No mission. No handler. No court dates. No medals. Just the forest. It moved slowly. Deliberately. Like it knew secrets too ancient for clearance levels. That night, I lit a fire. The good kind. The kind that doesn't need to be hidden. And I let myself remember. The things I had done. The lives I had taken. The lives I had saved. The rooms I had entered knowing I might not leave. The weight of the uniform when no one saluted. The quiet after being called a traitor by people who couldn't spell the word code. And the moment I realized I no longer needed revenge, because I had already won, not in a courtroom, not in headlines, but in the silent, irreversible shift of perception that happens when truth is no longer something you chase, but something you carry. The next morning, a bird landed on the porch rail. A cardinal, red as blood, still as stone. It watched me as I sipped my tea. Didn't move when I opened the door. Didn't fly when I stepped out. Just watched. Like it knew. I stayed in that cabin for 6 days. Didn't turn on a single device. Didn't check a single signal. Didn't answer a single call. I let the silence settle into my bones. Until I was ready. On the 7th day, I opened the encrypted case, the one that never left my side, inside one device, one link, one directive, a new assignment, voluntary, top-tier clearance, not a mission, a role, permanent liaison to Joint Shadow Operations, a command unit answering directly to the highest unseen authority. No paperwork, no interviews, no exit, just the work. The message read, "Your silence saved more lives than their approval ever could. We're ready when you are, Commander." I stared at it for a long time. Then I smiled. Not because I felt proud, but because I felt ready. I closed the case, washed the mug, extinguished the fire, and left. I didn't say goodbye to the cabin. You don't say goodbye to something that gave you back your breath. The drive to the airstrip was quiet. No music. Just the hum of tires on road and the echo of a woman who had finally stopped asking to be understood. At the hangar, a single plane waited. Black, unmarked, humming low. A man in a coat I recognized from old missions stood beside it. He nodded once. No words. He handed me a small pin, silver, subtle, shaped like a circle broken open at one end. No rank, no country, just a symbol. Welcome to the ones they never thank, he said. I pinned it on and stepped onto the plane. Inside. No windows. Only light. Soft. Controlled. 4 others sat already. No one looked up. They didn't need to. They knew. I sat, buckled in, and let the engines carry me. Not to war, but to work. Not to vengeance, but to purpose. As the ground disappeared beneath us, I thought of my mother, of my brother, of the courtroom, of the general, of the violin in the dark, of the mission that should have broken me but crowned me instead. They called me a traitor, and then a commander. But the truth, I was never either. I was the silence between the two, the one they couldn't predict, the one they couldn't destroy, the one they couldn't name. And now, I answer to no one, except the truth. I didn't need them to respect me. The whole world already did.